How's it going, guys? Today I'm going to be doing yet another Blu-ray haul. This year has been mostly online shopping because physical media has been on a decline in physical stores, and places like Barnes & Noble have been cutting their selection, and in terms of even Criterion pickups, it's just a small percentage of what the Criterion collection has to offer. Same thing goes with Arrow Video, and then at this point the titles that I'm looking for are more lesser known titles that you're only going to be able to find online. So a lot of the pickups unfortunately had to be online, and that's where it seemed like most of the deals were at. My first pickup was Billy Wilder's Ace in a Hole, fantastically written and tense film about journalistic corruption. Such an engaging watch. One of the films that inspired the 2014 film Nightcrawler. Billy Wilder has hit it out of the park for me every single film I've seen, and I still have to watch a good number of his films, but so far I'm really loving a lot of his stuff, and this film, one of his best. Next up is City Lights, the Charlie Chaplin film. This was actually my second Chaplin film that I had seen, and I fell in love with it right away. Such a tear-jerking film. I do prefer Gold Rush, but this is right up there. It's almost 100 years old, but it feels like such a timeless classic. I feel like anybody could really appreciate it who gives it a chance. Can never go wrong with a Charlie Chaplin film. I have not seen one that I haven't enjoyed. Some are a little bit better than the others, but City Lights, one of the best. Next up is Brian De Palma's Sisters. This one I recently checked out and was blown away by it. Anytime we have an Alfred Hitchcock-like film, and you know that immediately kind of draws me in, but Brian De Palma was able to make it a little bit more darker, a little bit more unique, and add his little flavor of horror to it. And this was just a blast to watch from start to finish. It's got a great score, great performances. It's actually scored by the same guy who did a lot of Alfred Hitchcock films. Next up is Elevator to the Gallows. It's a Louis Malle film. This was actually his debut film, and he made this when he was 24 years old. Just blown away by the sheer talent of this director, being able to shoot this movie at such a young age with not as much experience, and you never think that watching this movie. The heist element of this film is so well executed and just keeps you engaged. You know, you're kind of following two different stories, and how is this web of deceit going to conclude? Highest of recommendations. Such a fantastic film. I would highly recommend people check it out. And then next up from the same director is this time it's in English. The other one was a French film. This is My Dinner with Andre. You know, a film that takes place behind a dinner table for 2 hours with non-stop talking does not seem like the most engaging film, but it also depends on the conversation. But this is one of those films that time flew by. The first, I think, 40 minutes were a little bit slow, but I think that the whole purpose of that was to get you to feel uncomfortable and not engaged in the conversation, much like the two characters weren't until they started sharing a common topic that they both enjoyed talking about. And the whole experience with this film just had me sitting there like as if I was eavesdropping on a conversation, and an interesting one, not just some random conversation. And it just felt so natural and engaging. And I did think to myself, you know, 2-hour film that's just one long conversation behind a table, is that something I could come back to? And the more I thought about it, I thought, yeah, I do, because these are some important questions that keep bringing up. I mean, it's a movie about life and finding purpose, and there's so many other things that it's just like, every so often I definitely will want to check this out. Next up is an Alfred Hitchcock title, and that is Strangers on a Train. Now, I do own like 15 of his other films, and I realized that this was not part of the collector's set that I own, and this is easily one of his top 10 best films of his filmography. Usually his stuff, when it involves trains, usually is good, unless it's like his earlier stuff from like the 20s. Maybe not so much, but I think he really honed in his style later on in his filmography, and such a great film. I don't think enough people talk about this one. Next up is All Quiet on the Western Front. Now, this is the 1931. I was considering to pick up the one from last year, but I have to give it to the original. I think the original still stands out as a much more darker and harrowing film. Just visually, I am so much more impressed with this film. The sound design, oddly enough, is better in this. And, well, special effects, let's just say, the special effects were actual artillery. So, and the black and white cinematography, I just appreciated a lot more. And I think just at its core, I think it developed its characters slightly better. There was a, you kind of understood the young soldiers in the war a little bit better than the way they handled them in the newer film. I think in the newer film, being in German does help out. It does have also great cinematography. The score is absolute trash, unfortunately, in the new film. Balancing the two out, I kind of had to give it to the original, and it was a great deal for this. It was only like $8. Next up is Glengarry Glen Ross. Super underrated title. Like, I feel like it was the talk back in the 90s when it was, you know, in awards contention. But I don't think enough people give this movie credit, because when I first saw it, I was just floored by how engaged this kept me. The dialogue is so snappy, and there's so many great actors in this film as well. I mean, you have Jack Lemmon, Al Pacino, Alec Baldwin, Ed Harris, Kevin Spacey, Jonathan Pryce, and the list goes on, and just everyone's given such phenomenal performances. And Jack Lemmon, I mean, you really feel for that character about an aging salesman that just can't keep up with the younger generation. Just love this film, and I can't recommend this enough. Next up is Steven Soderbergh's Aaron Brockovich. Very enjoyable, lightweight film that's pretty much very easy to digest. Julia Roberts is spectacular in this role. Like, she just steals the entire show, and you remain engaged because of her. It's her performance. Like, this is not an investigative drama that focuses so much on the case itself, but more on how the person is dealing with handling the case. It's not Steven Soderbergh's best film, and it's not like the most detail-packed, you know, like I said, investigative drama, but it's very lightweight, very enjoyable. The comedic undertones work really well, and just a well-rounded film. Speaking of investigative dramas, we have one from a couple of years ago from Todd Haynes, Dark Waters. I remember seeing this in theaters and wasn't expecting a whole lot because I didn't know a ton about it. Easily one of the best biopics I have seen in the last decade, if not ever. Such a powerful film with astounding performances and attention to detail, and another film that just kept me engaged throughout, and pacing was almost perfect. I do need to revisit it. I have only seen it once, but it's a film that has stuck with me all these years, and finally seeing it drop in price, I thought it was time to pull the trigger and pick it up. Next up is United 93. I've owned this movie on DVD for years. I've always thought it was a great film, one of Paul Greengrass's best films outside of the Bourne series. I'd say this is more than likely the best 9/11 related film. Because World Trade Center, wasn't a huge fan of that. I think it's held up extremely well. Even though my taste in movies has changed over the years, it is still such an incredibly well-made film. Next up is Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Haven't watched this film in years. I remember watching it about 8 years ago and really liking it then. And since then, I've seen so many other films, and every time I watch those films, I'm like, this film was inspired by Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. And you know what? I'm like, for $6, I need to pick this up. I'm pretty sure if I liked it then, I'm gonna like it now. And it's a movie that has some really great performances. Like, you wouldn't expect a Jim Carrey film in the mid-2000s to be, at least for a drama, to be that good. And this one's kind of snuck up on me when I first saw it. Next up is a Tarantino film, and that is Jackie Brown. I remember enjoying this film. I know it's not like my favorite Tarantino film, and most people don't really talk about it that much, but I do own every other Tarantino film except, what was it, Death Proof? That's the only one I don't like. But I do enjoy this film quite a bit. The performances are excellent. As always, Tarantino has some incredible snappy dialogue, and it's just a very well-written film and interestingly pieced together movie that it might be a little bit on the long side for what it's telling, but overall I remember enjoying it a lot, and for the price I thought it was a very good deal, and it actually comes with a slipcover, which is pretty surprising. Next up is a recent title, that one of my favorite films of this year, and that is Guy Ritchie's The Covenant. Yeah, Guy Ritchie is a very hit or miss director for me. I've enjoyed the Sherlock Holmes movies, but, you know, other movies like Wrath of Man, you know, they've been okay. Like, I haven't been completely in love with his filmography. I still do need to check out Snatch. The Covenant was a very surprising film of the year because I had seen his other film this year that came out, Operation Fortune, and that was a pretty abysmal movie. And then later this came out, and I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but boy did this turn out to be a really great film. Performances are excellent. It's got an emotional hook to it, and just a really well-rounded film. Like, I had like barely any complaints about this. It was a great theater experience, and I felt like it had a lot of rewatch values. Next up is John Woo's Red Cliff Part 1 and 2. Got to see this earlier this year. The first half of the movie wasn't like the hugest fan, but what it did well was the third act. It was able to set up the second part, and the second part of this movie is absolutely fantastic and some of the best action I've seen on screen. I'd say overall, if you're viewing this as one giant film, it's a really well-made movie, and I enjoyed it, and just for the action, I would visit this all the time. There's some incredible scenes, some amazing cinematography. John Woo has a lot of other titles that get a little bit more attention. This one's kind of usually buried under there because it's such a lengthy kind of film, but I do recommend people check it out. Next up is The Black Scorpion, also known as The Banquet. Got to see this earlier this year and immediately knew I was going to pick it up on Blu-ray. This is such a beautifully made film. The costume design, the production, the story. It's like a mixture of Macbeth meets Hamlet, and it's just superbly acted. The score is just so enchanting. It's such a visually stunning film to look at. It was a no-brainer for me to pick it up. It's one of the lesser known titles. It's a little hard to find a physical copy of this, so when I saw this in used condition for $8 and some change, I thought this has to be picked up. This is an incredible deal. Because typically this goes for like anywhere between $20 if you can find it, but usually it's like $30. So highest of recommendations for this movie as well. Next up is Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Got this really cheap. I think it was like 10 bucks on 4K. Such a really great deal for a movie that I got to experience actually in theaters this year. So glad I gave this movie a second chance, because when I first saw it, which was like well over 10 years ago, I wasn't the hugest fan of it actually, because I think I had this notion of martial arts films to look a certain way, and this is not a conventional martial arts film. And now I've come to appreciate it a lot more. It's very majestic and it's almost like a dance. It's just a beautiful narrative, a very touching film that has aged very gracefully. And next up is Ghost in the Shell, the 4K. This was only $8. Now, it didn't come with the slipcover. I had to make that myself because I wasn't the biggest fan of the artwork underneath here, but so decided to make my own. But as far as the movie goes, really love the concept here, the world building, and the score. My gosh, the score I've listened to countless amounts of times on a loop. It's so freaking good. Not like a movie without its problems, but a movie that I know I'm going to revisit just for the visual aspect of it, the concept, and that amazing score. Definitely will be revisiting this. One of the best sci-fi anime films out there. It is far better than the Scarlett Johansson film that we got a few years back. Just watch this film. It's shorter and it's better. Everything about it is better than that adaptation. And last but not least is Spider-Man Across the Universe on 4K. Such a delightful film of 2023, and a little bit skeptical about seeing this originally because I really loved the first entry in the series, but this was able to maintain that visual aesthetic, add some new styles, and really get imaginative with the storytelling and just the humor work. The voiceover work was great. Not a whole lot to complain about. I know the ending was something that caught me off my guard because it sets up the next film. It ends it on a bit of a cliffhanger, but nonetheless, just one of the most rewarding theater experiences, and a film I do see myself revisiting quite a bit. But so far I've been very impressed with both of these entries, and they've been better than the Marvel stuff. That's the thing, you know, so we're getting some really creative and imaginative films, and it's coming from Sony. It's not coming from Disney. So yeah, that wraps up all my Blu-ray pickups for the month of November, mostly towards the end of the month. That's when all the deals were happening. I'd be curious to hear what you guys picked up during your Blu-ray hunting in November. What deals were available in your area? What deals did I miss out on? Because I knew there were a lot of films out there and I missed out on a few of them. Like Pan's Labyrinth, I knew kind of fluctuated in price, but I knew I wanted to rewatch that film. Alien Covenant, I remember I wanted to give another try before I bought it. So just make sure to comment down below in the comment section what you guys picked up and what I missed. Hit that like and subscription notification bar, and I will see you guys in a later video.